Here we are at Southwestways. We've got the Sentinel with us, and we've got the MegNeg on there, and we're just gonna be testing out a couple new settings on it and seeing how they perform in the rock garden behind me. It's not a very long rock garden. It is pretty fun though, and it's got a lot of varying terrain on it. So it's got, you know, like the bigger drops on it. It's got the fast sections. It's just a good overall place to test out suspension settings, because you see how it performs in, you know, different circumstances. And quick little view of it down here. But we also have a little camera on the bike to film the shock action on, which I think is pretty neat. This is where the Insta360 Go 2 comes into play, and it looks really cool. I haven't tried it out yet, so we'll see if it works. But what I've done is jerry-rig the camera onto my actual frame there, as you can see right there, and it's just pointed at the shock. And so let that run and see if it's gonna get in my way or not. But then that should be able to give us a good sense of how the shock's actually moving under the weight of the rocks and me and everything else. And then that way we can keep that same camera angle, change the settings on the shock, and then really actually see in action if it's doing anything. Because a lot of times with suspension settings, you can get into your head and be like, oh, this is definitely better, but it's really not. You know, you're just riding better at a certain time or whatever. But this way we'll get a little more, you know, scientific with it, and we'll be able to actually see how much travel we're using, how often we're using it, where that support range really is. With the MegNeg, you are supposed to get more support in the mid-stroke, and I mean, honestly, right off the bat, that was very noticeable without even having to look at it or change the settings or anything. I was right off the bat, so much more mid-stroke support. But we'll go ahead and take a couple runs down, see how it goes, and check back in. Okay. So we got both the cameras going. The Insta 2 is currently pointed down. Maybe you'll be able to see it on this. It's pointed down at the shock, and we're just gonna let it run and see what happens. Cool. All right. Very interested in how this turns out, and I'm really hoping I don't end up hitting the camera on accident or breaking it. So I don't think they'll send me another one that quickly, but we'll see. All right, let's take a rundown. So personally choosing the rougher lines a little bit, because I do want to see how it behaves. And it looks like it's still on there, so that's great. I was a little worried that it would fall off, but let's finish up the rest of this trail with a couple small jumps here so we can see how the compression looks. Then maybe we can take it down to the jump line later, but not 100% sure on that. Just dropped my GoPro. Okay, so first lap down felt really good. Noticeable improvement from the previous version, which was pretty much the same thing with 1 token in the positive air chamber. Now it's 0 tokens and 2 bands in the negative, 30% sag, 181 PSI. Surprisingly, this little guy held on. I'm pretty impressed by that, but I'm gonna go for run 2 and see how it feels. Okay, we're now up to 190 from 185 and something around like 28% sag. Don't really know, hard to tell in the parking lot. Let's see how it goes, see if we notice a difference. Mainly looking for the bottoming out. I think off the top it's still really smooth. Yep, very smooth still. Yep. Whee! Yeah, it feels good. Pretty stoked on it. All right. So I'm back out here at my local, got the bike here behind me. So we changed up the settings a little bit. This time I'm going with all 4 bands in the negative chamber, 0 volume spacers in the positive. Theoretically, this should give me the most coil-like and linear feel that this shock can get. I'll throw a link to a graph put out by another bike shop that showed 4 bands, 0 spacers versus an actual coil shock, and they are strikingly similar. And so this is one of the reasons that I wanted to try out the MegNeg. I read that although you can make it extremely progressive, you can also make it way more linear. You can already notice the off the top suppleness We'll see if we can carry that through and keep it as consistent throughout the entire stroke of the shock. I'm really interested to try this out. So I'm running 190 PSI, which is the same as I was previously. And surprisingly, it's also still sitting at pretty much the exact same sag, but we'll look at it on the Go 2 and see how it behaves. So I'll go ahead and take a run down and then we can check that out. The Go 2 is a lot closer to the cranks this time. I know you can't see that, but let's see if it gets knocked down. Go ahead and take a rip and see how she feels. Honestly feels pretty good, not gonna lie. Went a little deep on that. At least deeper than I usually go. But seems solid. Camera's still on there. Wow. Still didn't bottom her out. So that went pretty well. I'm pretty happy with how the shock feels right now. Like I said, so we're running 4 bands in the negative, 0 bands in the positive, got 195 PSI in there, and it still feels super supple. And it's got a really coil-like feel, which is amazing. Taking it through the jumps, I still managed to save quite a bit. Not quite a bit, but I didn't completely bottom it out. I think this is where I'm gonna stop, and I'm gonna ride it like this for quite a while and see how it feels. Further down the road, I think maybe I'm considering putting in 0 negative bands and seeing how that feels. Going off 2 bands and 1 positive, or 2 negative and 1 positive, it was pretty harsh, so I don't think I'll enjoy that very much, but you never know, and it's worth a shot. So get back to my house, put all this together, and see what we can find out. I think it'll be interesting looking at the Go 2 footage and seeing how the shock actually moves, and really interesting to see if I can even tell a difference. It'd be pretty funny to get back and not be able to know which one's which. So either way, we'll figure it out. So I got home and I put the footage side by side. For comparison, I wanted to keep the sag percentage the same. I think this will give us equal playing ground for each shock to be able to notice what the actual differences between 2 bands and 4 bands are. One of the things that I noticed is that in the mid-stroke, they are relatively similar. If you really get down to the nitty-gritty, and it's hard because I was going 2 different speeds down this trail. The 2 bands does tend to pop up a little more and stay a little bit higher in the sag. But where you really notice it more than that is in the bottom out. The 2 bands, it has far more ramp up at the end of the stroke, and you can see that at the jumps. When I land, you can tell that the 2 band version stays higher and it doesn't use as much travel. And this is one of the reasons I went to 4 bands, is to get that full range of travel as well. All right, so final thoughts on the MegNeg. Real quick, pros and cons. Pros, it offers a lot more suspension tunability compared to the stock shock. It feels amazing. You can make it as progressive as you want, and you can make it extremely linear, which is fantastic. It also, in my case, allowed me to run deeper in the sag. So this is a big thing. A lot of people are saying online that if you have a more progressive bike, the MegNeg doesn't necessarily help. And I don't think that's true after trying this. Before the MegNeg, I was running about 25-26% sag to be able to keep my bike from bottoming out. And that's at the very low end of the range for the Sentinel. Now with the MegNeg, I'm able to run at about 30% sag. I don't bottom out, I get so much more grip, and it feels amazing on technical terrain. So I really think that you can put the MegNeg on pretty much any bike, maybe, you know, extremely progressive bikes up in like the 30% progressivity range. Might get a little crazy, I haven't tried it, I don't really know. But for the Sentinel, which is at 24%, I think, it feels great. That being said, getting into the cons, it's really annoying to set up. I had to take my shock on and off maybe 15 times. I didn't show it in the video, but I started out with 2 positive spacers and 2 negative. I went down to 1 positive, 2 negative, 0 positive, 2 negative, 4 negative, 1 positive. Like I tried so many different combinations before I got to the final result that I'm staying at now. If you're someone who doesn't like tearing apart your bike and putting it back together, at least the suspension, which in my case is annoying on a carbon bike. You know, I gotta constantly check the torque settings, all that. That might be annoying for you. This isn't just a throw it on there and forget about it thing, and that's what everyone says, and it's 100% true. So the other negative is having to run much higher pressure. I don't have that issue since I'm, you know, not on the heavier end of things, but if you are on the heavier end of things, not calling you fat, but you know, some of you got big bones, so that might be an issue since the Super Deluxe only has, or not only, but it has a 325 PSI limit, and that's really it as far as negatives go. Overall, I'd say I'm extremely happy with it. It's performed much better than I thought. It's about $90 right now, and if you have the cash, I highly recommend trying it out. The installation is easy. There's plenty of videos online to show installation. If you have the time, it doesn't take long, and it will, for me personally at least, dramatically improve your suspension and really help the way that the bike rides. Also, didn't show any footage of the shock with the stock Aircan on it. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, just leave me a comment. I can do it. I got a little lazy because I did take it on and off so many times. I didn't film it originally with the stock Aircan, so I was like, I don't want to do it. But if that's something you're interested in seeing, just let me know, and I can take the time to do that. If there are any other questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, I think that's it.